Late one morning in February 2015, I entered the softly lit den of someone I barely know, who's been recommended to me by someone else I barely know. I sit on the couch, swallow a capsule of MDMA, more commonly known as ecstasy. I lie down, put on an eye mask, and go inward. This is not recreation. I'm taking MDMA because I'm hoping it will release me from a psychological and physical ache that has plagued me for over 2 decades, and which I've hidden from others with all of my might because I was trained to look normal. It's like shame and love are battling for possession of my soul. If I really let go, will I be saying goodbye to myself, or just an idea that I've been holding on to? I'm beginning to think that I could have 1,000 sessions on MDMA, and I just keep hitting this wall. We agree that on my next session, I'll take a small amount of psilocybin mushrooms and add it to the mix. At one point, I sit up and say, when you are served a glass of love, don't spit it out. I am a helpless infant, bonded to nobody, feeling completely alone in an unsafe world. It's a state one can't achieve through achievement. It's a place that's simple and divine and welcoming. I noticed the hospital's motto on the wall. We put patients first. But for you, we'll make an exception. So I guess I should tell you a little about my family and my child. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave out everything positive. We would never appreciate stars if they weren't surrounded by darkness.
Well then, Mordecai the Jew, I will give you a choice. You can bow down now, or I will choose a day, and on that day, I will destroy, exterminate, and massacre all the Jews in Persia.
Don't you think that's a little extreme?
I like to think it's proactive.
How about, instead of destroying us, you just resent us deeply?
Not enough.
It's worked for other cultures.
Enough. You have 10 seconds to bow, or I shall use the power of this ring to turn my threat into law.
I
9
need
seconds.
more time to think
8,
this out.
7.
There's so much to
6,
consider. I'm not ready.
5 seconds.
Spotlight, please. What would you do if you were forced to face to some a simple choice, but to break a holy law, one that makes me who I am? Actions have ripples, even ones we never mean. Actions have ripples that can never be foreseen.
4 seconds.
What's one bow anyhow? What's all this fuss about? Maybe no one will find out. At least my people will be safe, at least for now. Actions have ripples we never can predict. Actions have ripples. If I bow, who would convict? I would.
3 seconds.
Laws I've studied all day long, laws that teach me right from wrong, that have guided every act, that have kept my world intact, at least till now. And if I bow, who am I? Actions can be holy, courage takes nerve. Actions must be holy. If I bow, who do I serve?
2 seconds.
How can I face my people if I bow? Can I face them if I don't? Who knows what harm looms if I do? Will my people all be told, Mordecai bowed and so must you? Bow down, you Jew! Actions have ripples, they define the world we live in. Actions have ripples, will I ever be forgiven?
1 second.
I feel history on my shoulders, palpitations in my heart. I feel my body leaning, it's tearing me apart. I reach inside me, I'm plagued with doubt. I reach beyond me, there's no way out. What would you do? What would you do? What would you do?
Time's up.
What should I do?
Welcome, welcome to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vredos. Our guest today on the Radical Imagination is Rich Orloff, who's been described as one of the most popular unknown playwrights in the country. Rich's work has been called theater with a brain and a heart, touching and truthful, irreverent and compassionate. His goal is to engage audiences and take them on a ride through the human experience. Some plays are just pure fun. Fun is one of the best experiences life has to offer. The Marx Brothers, especially in their film Night at the Opera, profoundly influenced his thinking and sense of anarchistic humor. His plays vary from comic explorations of such topics as disability, funny as a crutch, and lust among older people, advanced chemistry, to reflections on our journeys through the pandemic, blessings from the pandemic, and perhaps most significantly, his one-person play about his underground psychedelic therapy, It's a Beautiful Wound. A true story of his adventures in underground therapy using MDMA, also known as ecstasy and psilocybin mushrooms. It's a poignant, deeply personal story based on cutting-edge experimentation that helped Rich and others heal from deep psychological wounds and revealed possibilities of love he and they never before considered. In a sense, it's one person's journey towards reconciliation with his soul. But others might also see it as a larger cultural commentary that reflects on the moral meaning of America and its soul. It's possible healing. It's possible spiritual transformation and ability to love the poor, the disenfranchised, the other, itself, and marginalized people around the world. The beautiful wounds, blessings, and worlds Rich courageously and generously offers in his plays and spiritual poetry perhaps can help America explain itself to itself and become a country where love is what justice looks like in public.
Wow.
Right? Wow.
Wow, I sound really cool.
You do sound cool, and you are cool.
Well, thank you, Jim. Nice to be here.
It's such a blessing, and it's wonderful to have you here and discuss your work and your experiences,
Thank you.
which I've looked at, and I know our audience is going to enjoy tremendously. But let's begin. Well, let's get a little background about you. As a playwright,
Yes.
You worked also at TV prior to.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit of your own
Okay.
history.
Born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
Went to Oberlin College, which was a wonderful place for a young, sensitive, neurotic soul like myself.
Music also wasn't wonderful
Yes,
music.
yes. I walked
school.
through their conservatory many times during the winter.
Not in the summer, though.
Not during the summer. Then I walked outside, but during the winter it was a great shortcut from one part of the campus to the other.
Okay.
Spent a little time in TV. It was kind of like my grad school. But kept hearing in my head, "You're a playwright. You're a playwright."
But wait now, no, you went very fast.
Yes, I am. Yes,
Mary Tyler Moore, you were involved in with her show?
No.
Which shows were you?
I like to skim over it.
Okay.
Mostly like really awful shows.
All right.
I grew up on All in the Family and Mary Tyler Moore, and went to Hollywood not so much to make it in TV, but I thought I'm going to learn more here than I'm going to learn in any grad school. I thought the best comedic playwrights were writing for those shows. By the time I got there, those shows were off the air, and so I'm not particularly proud of the shows I worked. I'm not proud. The shows I worked for were a great sort of training ground because they got me out of the preciousness of writing, rather than like, oh, I'm going to wait for some great idea. If a scene had to be written today, I wrote the scene today.
Right.
And so it was a great training in just like, oh, I need to write. I hope inspiration hits me, but I need to commit to the time to do it now.
And discipline you in a sense.
So it was a great place
structure.
for discipline.
Yeah.
It helped me learn to sort of not meander so much because, especially I was writing for a half-hour sitcom, so I had to get to the point. So I think there was a crispness to my writing. I hope there is, that I learned. But I also very early learned I just wasn't happy there. I was...
What age were you now at this point?
I was in my 20s.
The 20s, so
I was usually the youngest writer in the room. TV wasn't as hip then as it is now. And at some point I realized I need to leave LA, both because I was
You're bored. You're bored?
I was miserable. Bored is too simple a word. Life is short, and I just felt like, what am I doing with my life? Very 20s. And I mean, the money was great. I appreciate that. I get some royalties. I appreciate that. I now look back and wish I'd written for even more crap than I did. But I both didn't like LA. I didn't like writing for TV. I didn't know if I was a good playwright, but I knew I needed to find out. So I moved to New York about 30 years ago. With this sense of adventure, like, let's see what happens. To my delight, although I haven't had plays on Broadway, or even really off Broadway, I've had, my full-length plays have gotten hundreds of productions around the world. My short plays really took off and have had like over 2,000 productions. I'm kind of amazed.
No, well, you shouldn't be. They're very good.
Thank you.
They're very... So you're an underground star here.
Yes. No one outside of the theater knows who I am. Many people in the theater.
Well, after this show, they're going to know more.
Exactly.
But
yes.
Now that moves us. Or when does the psychedelic experimentation start?
So,
and that changed things too a lot.
Yes.
Right? So tell us a little about that. You're miserable. You're whatever.
I had good years and bad years.
Sure.
But there was this kind of existential ache that I've carried around in me. And I'd been in therapy, did all sorts of workshops. Nothing was making it better. And then I read about experiments with MDMA that were in the early 2000s with veterans and firefighters and rape victims, people who had had PTSD.
Right.
And MDMA had had wonderful success with these people in healing them.
Right.
I didn't qualify for any of these experiments.
You weren't a firefighter.
I'm not a firefighter, haven't been in a war.
Except perhaps with family members? Or?
Well, yeah. Yes, definitely. That's a whole other show.
Okay.
And they may be watching. Anyway.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
At a certain point, I thought, I want to try this. I also, in the 80s, before MDMA became illegal, I'd had some experiences with it in Los Angeles. It was like, there was a big buzz, have you tried this? So I tried it. And I remember the first time I tried it, about 40 minutes after I tried it, I was sitting in my easy chair and just calmed down, and life felt okay.
Were you with other people? Were
I
you
was
under
by myself.
Some sort of guide or anything? Or
Sunday afternoon in my apartment in Los Angeles.
Sunday afternoon. The park with George.
Exactly.
With Rich.
And I had never felt that like just okay.
I mean, just
in my
in
life.
40 minutes, it just came over you.
It just came over me. There are a couple times like after 20 minutes, I think I'm feeling something, and then after 40 minutes, no. It was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I went through the next few hours less stressed, less anxious. It was, at the beginning of the personal computer age, as hard as it is to believe now. And I knew I needed to buy a personal computer, and I went computer shopping on MDMA, knowing I was staying in it. I wasn't like tripping. I knew where I was. I knew I was going to buy a computer that day. I was on a drug. But I went to these stores, and for the first time, I wasn't embarrassed to ask lots of questions, like, well, why this model versus that model? I was fearless. All those things that trap us, that all those voices inside our head that say, I can't ask that, I'll look like an idiot. I didn't care.
The second or third time you had ever taken it?
First time.
The very first time.
This
was in LA. So.
In LA. A Sunday afternoon, I had finished the script early in the morning, said, I've got a free day. I'm going to try this thing that my friends are raving about.
See, if you were in New York and looking for a computer, you could have gone, I don't know if they're still in business, they probably are. Is it J&R? The place that's
right.
With all I think that's where I've gotten my computer. The Orthodox Jews, they would certainly ask you a lot of questions, and you would have a willing audience there. But
what was wonderful was I was asking all these questions to all these computer geeks who loved giving me answers.
Right.
So it was actually a wonderful day.
Right.
It also taught me, all these fears I carry around, I don't need to have. And so that experience stayed with me, and I had some more MDMA experiences. Flash forward to 2015.
If we could just flash back
Sure.
a little bit, just a couple of little questions. Had you taken psychedelics before LSD?
No.
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 Okay.
Nothing else.
And again, feeling fearless is something that a lot of people talk about when they take cocaine. But
it wasn't great. Actually, I had taken cocaine a couple of times. Not my thing. It made me too speedy.
Right.
MDMA did not give me grandiosity. The grandiosity
Right.
of it just, there was a sense of inner connection. So that, again, it's not like I was going to stores, like acting like I knew what I was doing. I was just being honest about what I didn't know.
Inner connection with what? With
connection to my heart and my soul and my mind.
Who you really were.
Exactly.
Deep down.
When I wasn't busy hiding behind defenses,
I see.
this is who I was. So my experience of that day was phenomenal.
Now, is it then, did you continue taking it? How does that
I took
work?
it occasionally,
Occasionally,
over the years.
What, every other week?
Once
or
a year. I mean,
once
a little
year?
more in the beginning. I saved it for special occasions. It's also, yeah, I didn't want to misuse it. I'm actually fairly cautious, despite the number of drug experiences I've had.
That's important, yeah, to bring out, because we'll get into this, but isn't the use of this now has become much more, is it more, I know it's still underground, but it's much more available. More people are taking it now.
More people know about it.
Know about it and are experimenting.
The experiments have gotten much more publicity.
Yes, yes.
Shortly, perhaps even over the next couple of years, the FDA looks like it will approve it for therapeutic use in specific conditions.
Let me just throw out this, because my wife Beatty also wanted to know too, as a psychotherapist too. She's curious, did this involve working with repressed memory?
Yeah, it deals with repressed everything. But I'll give you an example. Before I started underground therapy, because it took a while to find someone, I was in regular therapy and I had some MDMA, and I convinced my therapist to allow me to come in one day on MDMA.
Really? Okay.
Very nice, supportive guy, up for the adventure. And so I came in that day, and he tried to ask me lots of questions. I said, we need to slow this down. We need to trust the medicine. And so I just shared the thoughts that were coming up inside me on the medicine. And at one point, after a bit of silence, I just sat up in my chair and I looked at him and I said, you know, every time I come in here, there's part of me that doesn't want to like you, that doesn't want to trust you.
Doesn't want to, right. Okay.
And yeah, I'd had that thought in the very back of my head before that day, but I wasn't going to share that with a therapist or anyone. That's such an embarrassing thought.
But you're supposed to, right?
Well, that's the point.
That's the point. Get it
the
out.
whole point is to get beyond our defenses.
Right,
and on MDMA, I could say that to him cleanly and without shame or embarrassment. Him being a very good therapist heard me and said, thank you. And that was a turning point in our therapy, because at that point I realized, oh, I really can say anything to this person.
He wasn't judgmental.
Wasn't judgmental, and I don't even need MDMA to be honest with him. I needed MDMA to learn I could be honest with him.
And I don't know how much you want to get into this, but family background, was that central to establishing some of the repressions you were grappling with? Or what was it that you were?
One of the reasons I took MDMA was to find out the answer to that. I don't want to get into, I don't want this to turn into a therapy session.
No, sure not. Of course not.
But mostly I knew that I was carrying around this pain, not only this of emotional pain, but a physical pain that comes up in me. If I were fully relaxed now, my face would contort and I'd go to a place of anguish. And nothing else was helping me. And I could blame it on, I always hesitate with interpretation, because then we think interpretation is fact and interpretation is a guess.
Right. Never fully really know.
Right.
So just go with it. Go with the
Exactly.
flow, in a sense.
What I know as a fact was I was in pain.
Right. And this gave you less pain.
Yes. Or sometimes it threw me into the pain. It got me beyond defenses. It revealed things to me. That's the thing. Once I found this underground therapist, who actually isn't even a therapist, a sitter, a guide, someone who sat with me during the hours I would be on MDMA.
I see.
Which in the beginning I thought, well, anyone could do that. But no, this person knew how to sit, knew how to really be present with me, took notes about everything I would say under the influence, and I'm very verbal when I'm on MDMA. Right. And I was amazed at some of the things that I was saying. Yeah, the truths, the awarenesses, the downloads.
And that led you to a different sort of writing, or how was that reflected in the writing that you then started producing?
Great question. At first, I was still writing plays, but also I'm going to really appreciate the concept of sort of serendipity and synchronicity. And I knew that the joy I had felt in playwriting was beginning to diminish. And I was accepted to an artist colony, Ragdale, outside Chicago. And I brought with me an idea for a play. And I also brought with me all the notes from my sessions that I'd had at that point on MDMA. And I thought, maybe there's a one-person show here. I'm a big fan of Spalding Gray.
Yes.
At one point, I wanted to be the next Spalding Gray, but then decided to be a playwright. I loved his honesty and humor, his ability to look at himself in his autobiographical one-person shows. And I thought, well, I've got 3 weeks at this artist colony. Let me write a draft of this, see what happens. And I wrote a draft, shared it with my friends at the colony. They both loved it and had lots of notes. The first draft didn't tell my story. It just talked about the experience of being in underground therapy. And they said, Rich, we need to care about you. You're the hero of this. So I didn't really plan on it being that autobiographical or that revealing, but the playwright in me knew, like, oh, I need to make this more revealing, so it'll be an interesting story. So I sort of fumbled into this very revealing story that became It's a Beautiful Wound.
It's a yes.
Yes.
A takeoff on It's a Beautiful World, or
it's something that I said once under the influence during one of my sessions, and I thought this is sort of the essence of the story and my journey, that we each carry around our wounds, and these wounds can tell us more about what's meaningful about life and who we are than anything else. So I need to pay attention to this wound rather than just try to get over it as quickly as possible.
Right, because that could be a source of great creativity and open yourself to more love and
it's part of me. And if I'm going to squish down that part of me, then I won't know me. And in that odd way, at the risk of being slightly grandiose, which I try to avoid, the more I know me, the more I can understand what it's like to be human and what it's like to be someone else. So I think it's deepened my compassion for others and what we all go through.
So it's not for our audience here, and for myself, it's not these plays that you then wrote. It's not the drug that is talking. It's you. It's part of you that has now been released or given permission to write what was already there but was bottled up.
I guess I'm not going to. Mostly, I just thought there was a certain point after one of my sessions, and I had multiple sessions on MDMA, and later added psilocybin mushrooms to the mix because I wanted to go even deeper. I thought, this is an amazing story. I need to tell people. If I'm going to respect the drug, if I'm going to respect the experience I had, I need to sort of repay the favor by telling other people about this. Again, this was, I wrote the first draft in 2017, 2018. We know so much more now about it. Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, has come out. At that point, very few people knew about it. And it's still, there are all these talks about it, but they're not the personal story that I think is important. I felt I could share a personal story to take people through the experience as opposed to describing it from a detached scientific place. That was my goal.
That was your goal, and you certainly succeeded.
Thank you.
In that sense. And then
and the play has been very well received. I've performed it all over the country, and to my shock, the first few times I shared it, I thought, we'll see how people respond, because
these are college campuses or repertoire?
No, just various theaters and psychedelic societies and conferences in New York, and did it in New Orleans about a year ago. I did it in LA. That performance was actually captured on video, and so people can watch the show on YouTube now, any time of the day or night in their pajamas. Just go to I
Go
look
ahead.
at the
Yes,
camera.
tell 'em where to go to.
Yes, because
Yes.
if I may plug, if you're curious about the show, one, you can reach me at richorloff.com. That's my website. If you want to watch the show, just go to YouTube, type in "It's a Beautiful Wound," and you'll see the show. It's 80 minutes long, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, you should. Now, opening this all up, I mean, other people are going to react differently. I
Yes.
mean, obviously, is there, I know people that have experimented with this and also have directed and the people they've been doing it with have directed them toward past lives that they might have.
Yeah,
this is
no.
not anything, no, okay.
Yeah, I'm stuck in this life.
But yeah, we're all, yes, I think that's probably a good
Yes,
idea.
I've gotten
yeah.
insights about
Into
my
this-
childhood.
Right.
That's enough.
That was yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I love that grimace that you had. No,
Thank
this
you.
is not.
Yeah.
But come on now, where does Marx Brothers come in on this?
Directly, not at all. Although it
Okay.
certainly influenced my sense of comedy, and I think there is an anarchistic spirit in me. If I may direct the conversation a little bit,
Please.
and it will end up answering your question.
Good.
One of the biggest surprises when I started this therapy was the fact that when under the influence of MDMA, I started talking about the divinity of the soul and wanted to connect more to my divinity and the divinity of others. And divinity is not a word I used when sober. I was born and raised Jewish, so superficial Jew. I mean, I was bar mitzvah.
I don't know if you were superficial.
There wasn't.
Oh, right. Yeah. All right.
There wasn't this. You can use whatever words you want.
Yeah, yeah.
I've sometimes joked that my family had a deep commitment to superficial Judaism.
All
Yeah,
right.
I was bar mitzvahed,
Yeah.
but there was no sense of real spirituality in my family.
Yeah.
There's some. I'm being
I
reductionistic. And I tried going to various synagogues as an adult. Nothing quite fit. I gave it up completely. You know, we could sit under a tree, especially on MDMA, feel very spiritual. But suddenly, after about a year and a half of this therapy, I had a desire 1 year on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, to attend Yizkor services, which is the memorial service for one's family. Both my parents had passed away by then. And went to this service at the synagogue Romamu in New York City, which is a very sort of part of the Jewish renewal movement. It's a very modern blend of Hasidism and New Ageism and Buddhism, all put in this blender. It's very joyous and alive.
A lot of music. We've been there.
A lot of music.
I
it's
think
a wonderful place.
Met.
It's possible.
At some point. We haven't been for a while, but we used to go. Rabbi Ingber.
Rabbi David Ingber, a profound influence on me. All of the community has been a profound influence.
Yes.
I liked the souls in the room. And suddenly I was at this synagogue where rather than just, now we turn to page 47, now we turn to page 49, there was a sense of joy and spirit and soulfulness in the room. And it changed my life again. I was not planning to ever, be reconnected to Judaism. I was happy without it. I didn't feel there was anything missing, but suddenly the combination, psychedelics led me back to Judaism, which kind of amuses me. It spoke to me, and I realized that my soul needed a community. My soul has a few communities now. I also have a psychedelic community of friends who've had that experience. Romamu is another. And I'm getting the Marx Brothers, trust me.
No,
they
may be superficial Jews
too,
but not Groucho. But maybe
not Groucho. Not Harpo either.
No.
Then the pandemic came. You might have read about it in the paper. And suddenly I started writing poems just to deal with the moment, and I started sharing them at a support group that was online on Zoom at Romamu, and also a support group that I was part of on Sunday night. Remember how alone we were and how Zoom helped connect us. And to my surprise, people were responding to my poems. I had written poems before. I didn't plan to be a poet.
But the audience was receptive.
The audience was receptive, and ironically, I think my years as a playwright helped me with my poems because I write for the ear. I don't write just, when you're writing a play, people have to absorb what you're saying immediately. They can't go, oh, that's interesting. Let me think about that for the next 5 minutes, because the play is moving on.
Yeah.
So I developed a very specific style of poetry. And at the same time, that was bringing me deep. There is the part of me that just likes to have fun in my writing.
Yeah.
And so I wrote my first musical comedy, Esther in the Spotlight.
Yes, I wanted to get to that.
And that definitely has a Marx Brothers influence in me. So my playwriting brain that had just written plays for decades suddenly split in half. And there is suddenly this poet side that's sort of spiritual and deep, and this musical comedy side that I think has some depth to it, but is mostly about, let's just pour out the gags because musical comedies let you do that.
And this was performed at Ramamu.
Yes, Esther in the Spotlight was performed in March 2022.
Wow.
Purim, there was an annual Purim show.
And my connection to all this was my 35, 40-year relationship with Michael Lerner, who wrote the book, Rabbi Michael Lerner, who wrote the book Jewish Renewal, who spoken at Ramamu, connection there, and of course Susanna Heschel and my wife knew Shlomo Carlebach and Reb Zalman, and so it's a very interesting community.
Yes, I'm very grateful I discovered them because I had no idea it existed until a few years ago.
But please, we were playing the excerpt from Esther in the Spotlight on Esther. And Mordecai, tell us a little bit what's going on. Because he's confronted with a very serious moral dilemma there, right?
Yes, so often when I write plays, the first draft is just about let's have fun, and then I realized I need to add some depth. And as I was working on Esther in the Spotlight, which is based on the book of Esther from the Bible, public domain, and I was having fun with the story and bringing my own take to it. I kind of saw it as a sort of a Mel Brooks take on the story of Esther.
Just for our audience, a little brief summary of the story.
Esther in the Spotlight and the Book of Esther, set in ancient Persia. It's one of the last books of the New Testament. Highly problematic, probably never happened. In ancient Persia, the Jews are living there. Esther, the king gets pissed off at his wife. Basically, she goes, the king's looking for a new queen, has a beauty pageant. It's actually in the book. Esther, a Jewish woman, enters the contest.
With the Persian king now.
With the king. The king chooses her, so she becomes queen.
Oh my.
Kind of not thrilled about it, although, again,
she's
not thrilled about it. Meanwhile, there's a new prime minister, Haman, who's just awful. And Haman has a huge ego, and at one point, and decrees that all the Jews have to bow down to him, which is, depending on your interpretation, against holy law. We're not supposed to bow down to anyone. No one becomes a false god. So at one point, Haman confronts Mordecai, says, you need to bow down to me. Mordecai, who is one of the elders of the community, also the uncle of Esther, it all connects.
Wow.
So Mordecai has to decide, do I bow to him and break this holy law? Or do I not bow to him, in which case the Jews could be wiped out?
Wow.
And I realized at that point, oh my God, this is a serious moment in my show. This is a moment to deepen the whole show. And so I wrote a song called What Would You Do? That was sung beautifully by the actor Charles Gerber in the show.
Yes, and our audience has been able to see that because we're playing that excerpt and
cool.
with that song. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Should we?
Charles helped me
Who's Charles?
Charles Gerber, the actor who played Mordecai,
I see. Okay.
has been on Broadway, has
Right.
toured nationally, is a friend of mine. Thank God he came in. And I had a not very good song at that point for Mordecai, and I realized I need to rewrite this song totally for Charles because he's so good.
So without, it should be, you want to give the ending out, but what, or should we? I know our audience is now running to see the complete production, but
it will actually be. It was performed at Rumamu in 2022. It was performed the next year in Tel Aviv and Toronto, and it's depending on when this airs, it's going to be a concert version of it will be performed March 19th, 20th, and 21st
what
in
days
the Miami
are those?
area.
What days?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night.
So our show will be on the 17th, so that will
Yes.
usher in.
Yes, if anyone is
production.
watching in Florida or has family in South Florida,
You can send a link,
yes.
and they'll all see it now. Well, and then you've also, I mean, you have a lot of fun.
Yes.
And in your plays and so on, but you're dealing with serious issues.
Yeah,
you also,
that's the fun part.
That's fun. Dealing with Vietnam, right?
That
was another
years ago,
earlier
I wrote a
play,
play
yes.
called Days of Possibilities.
Very difficult for you to write, right?
I would
Or
say
was
the word
it?
challenging. I was just starting out as a playwright. And I was also an alumni officer at Oberlin.
Yes.
And one year they decided to have a special reunion for focusing on the Vietnam era at Oberlin College. And I was part of the committee planning that. And they said, well, we should
What year was this now?
I believe it was 1990, 89
So
or 90.
this is a good 17 years after we more or less fully got out.
Yes.
Yeah. 17 years.
So it was looking back on that era, and there was discussion of like, we need to have some speaker come in, a keynote speaker. And I said, I think that's a bad idea. We're having alumni who lived this experience, and then we're gonna have some speaker talk about it. Someone should reach out to the people who had the experience and somehow compile some theatrical evening. And so I volunteered myself. By that point, I had not written a good full-length play. I'd written some good short plays. And Oberlin, which is also a very important part of my life and support in my journey, said, okay, Rich, go write it. So I spent the next 6 months writing this play, having never written a full-length play, a good full-length play before. And knowing that I had to be honest, I didn't make anything up. I reached out to students who had been alums, and they sent me letters, and I interviewed them over the phone. I interviewed a couple people in person. And so I suddenly had this challenge of how do I take all these stories and shape it into a play?
And the timeline is that you had the psychedelic experience.
Yes.
Prior, so you were in the process of really opening up, and this was a very...
You're confusing some timelines.
No, okay, sorry.
I wrote the play
in
in
1990?
like 89, 90.
Okay.
Then revised it and made it even fuller.
Okay.
Learned a lot.
Okay.
So it charts the journey of one college campus over time.
Right. Got it. Okay.
And there's both one version called Days of Possibilities that I love. There's also a published version of the play called Vietnam 101, The War on Campus. Between us, a title I don't like as much, but people convinced me I needed to put Vietnam into the title. And that play has been produced at theaters and colleges and high schools around the country. Very exciting. But that was the beginning of my playwright's career. If I may again flash forward to modern times, psychedelics only over the last 8 or 9 years, I think, have really influenced my writing. They don't...
2015.
2015 is when I really started the journey. I had dabbled.
Okay.
But it wasn't a major part of my life. Now it's a major part of my life. Now it is a continually profound teacher to me.
You mentioned Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
You threw him in there, and then of course the Marx, that famous film Good Morning Vietnam, Robin Williams.
Yes.
These are, well, certainly Good Morning Vietnam was sort of a dark comedy.
But brought in.
But
Robin Williams is definitely an heir to that kind of comedy.
And by the way, just in past, my next door neighbor, J.T. Walsh, plays the, whatever he is, the commander there.
Right.
That's totally pissed with Robin.
Right.
Who's doing the radio show, and he's such a hit with the soldiers.
Yeah.
But J.T., I forget whatever his character is, wants him out of there. Eventually, does get him out of there.
You need an antagonist, if I may. You've done a wonderful job of sort of covering a lot part of my life, but I would love to focus a little bit on my poetry because
absolutely.
Again, this was not planned, so I wrote these poems during the pandemic, a response to and they got a good response. To my surprise, then a temple in Toronto, Temple Sinai, that knew both about my comedies and knew about my poetry. I had shared many of my poems that I wrote during the pandemic. I shaped into a theater piece because that's how my brain worked. And so it was presented at Temple Sinai and elsewhere. And they commissioned me to write poetry in response to the Yizkor service, which I mentioned earlier, this memorial service on Yom Kippur. Right. And I thought this was a crazy idea. Like, I'm not that Jewish, and I'm not that much of a poet, but I love getting into things where I have no idea what I'm getting into, and I said, okay, I'll give this a try.
Sort of like this show.
Sort of like this show, exactly like
See,
this show.
I think it's going great.
Thank you. And so I started these tutorials over Zoom with Rabbi Michael Dolgan, the rabbi at Temple Sinai. Yeah. And these poems just started coming out of me. Again, like, okay, I'm writing more poems. And so suddenly my goal was to write 18 poems. 18 has a spiritual meaning for Judaism. And I ended up overshooting and writing about 50. So,
and you brought, now I know our audience is speaking to us.
Yes.
You want to read one for us? I
will read one. Some of them that one preface to the poem. Sure. So I wrote these poems, and I thought, then what am I going to do with these poems? And I had permission from Temple Sinai to share them beyond Temple Sinai. And I thought, well, I don't want to just get them published in a book, because that will end up on some dusty poetry shelf. And
Blessings from the Pandemic.
That was my first group of poems, but I've since written many more.
Okay.
And I tried getting other places to do Esther in the Spotlight. A few have. But I ended up with this long list of email addresses of synagogues, Reformed, Reconstructionist, Jewish Renewal, another list of friends. And I decided a year ago, I'm going to send out one of my poems to this list, including people who have no idea who I am. No idea how the response would be. And to my shock, not only did over 1,000 people just open the email, I thought, I had no idea. But I got like over 100 emails telling me how much the poem meant to them.
And you have thousands of followers, right?
Well,
2,200, 23?
Well, I kept, after the first week, I thought, oh shit, what am I going to do now? I hadn't really thought beyond the first week. And I thought, okay, I need to choose a second poem, a third poem, and I started sending out a poem a week. And to my surprise, people kept opening the emails and reading the poems and telling me how much the poems meant to them. One of my friends who lives in Australia and who's a Unitarian started publishing my poems in an Australian Unitarian newsletter. And that got good responses. So I thought, oh, why am I limiting my email list to synagogues and Jewish people? So I started adding Unitarians and other denominations. And so that expanded the list. Quakers. And now over 2,200 people read my poems each week. I'm continually amazed. And so to connect some of these dots, I did plan on this a few years ago. If it hadn't been for the pandemic and my connection to Romamu and the deepening from psychedelics, I would not be writing, I think, either musical comedies or poetry. And here I am today.
So yeah, it's like a jazz musician in a sense. You're taking, I think, you know, I've got some addresses. You could try Chabad maybe, or maybe yeshivas. But which poem would you like to read for us?
Well, I'm torn. Let me read two poems.
We've got time, right?
The first poem is called A Prayer Under a Tree. And I'll just read the poem and then tell you what inspired it. I lay under a tree the other day, a big tree, and I looked at a single leaf. I imagined I was the leaf, and I imagined the leaf saying, I'm not like those leaves on those branches far from me. I am my own leaf. Then I looked at the whole tree and the thousands of leaves on the tree, and I looked at myself again and thought, forgive me for believing in the illusion of independence. Forgive me for pretending I'm not attached to something larger than just me. Forgive me for confusing uniqueness with separation. Forgive me for resenting all the reminders I can't do this by myself. Bless my tree, even if I can't control it. Thank you for the majesty of its branches and the strength of its roots and the good fortune that I was born as part of something so wonderful.
The awe and wonder.
Awe and wonder, and I wrote the poem sober. I write sober, but it was an experience I had under MDMA, just lying under a tree one day and putting things together in a way I never had before.
I want to get directly back to this, but you mentioned you write, you wrote it sober. I've had a wonderful, wonderful music critic composer, Bruce Adolph, who is director of the chamber orchestra at NYC Center. Terrific. He wrote a book about about composers, and he made reference to the fact that they may or may not have been on something, but that wasn't of concern.
Right.
Does it make a difference as to whether or not you are sober or not when you are creating?
Oh, yeah, of course it makes a difference. I mean, it's moot. Once when I was younger, I tried writing a scene and you know, I'd smoke some pot, sat down to write a scene, and all of the characters just wanted to sit on the couch and eat pizza. They didn't want to do anything. It was not creative. It was not inspiring.
How about some of the jazz musicians, though?
I'm not anybody else but me.
Okay, got it. Yes.
Well,
you're that leaf on the tree, and you're with
yes,
all of us.
And if other leaves want to smoke pot, and if it influences them, that's great.
Gotcha.
Let me read one more poem.
Please, absolutely, please do.
It's funny, I'm feeling a little shy, but I have that shy side. Because of MDMA, I could admit that. I'd rather, years ago, I was embarrassed, like, I can't admit I'm shy.
I can't wait till you read it. I love that.
Thank you.
I love that.
So this poem is called
Image. Now, when I see a huge tree again, I will think of this.
Thank you. I read that poem last spring to some people, and yeah, they were. I'm still amazed that these poems affect people so deeply.
And the springtime, we're going to have leaves soon on the trees.
I'm looking forward to that.
Same here.
So this other poem is called The Big Ask. Definitely inspired by a conversation I had with Rabbi Michael Dolgan. And we were talking, and one day I just started like, what's prayer about anyway? You know, why do we pray? And without overthinking it, the first draft of this poem came to me. And it was the first poem I shared when I started sharing my poems last spring, once a week. The Big Ask. To God, to my ancestors, to anyone who will listen, I ask and pray for this. Bless me with a peace that's deeper than happiness, that makes room for profound sorrow, that accepts pain and loss, that's not dependent on good news. Bless me with a peace that comforts me when I feel anguish, that steadies me when I feel uncertain, that expands me when I think small, that finds a way through my fiercest resistance. Bless me with a peace that stretches beyond my horizons, that heals even if I can't explain why, that offers delight as an everyday gift, that allows me to see blessings. Bless me with a peace that is a refuge from torment, that is an oasis from yearning, that is a sanctuary from trauma, that transcends all else but never denies all else. Bless me with a peace that renews my gratitude for life, and that I can access every time I let you in.
Wow. I'm not putting you on. I feel more peaceful listening to that.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure there's many in the audience that are.
Thanks.
It really is. It's
Thank you.
powerful.
I feel a little awkward doing this, but that doesn't stop me. If anyone is interested in being on my poetry list, they can reach me through my website, richorloff.com. It has many samples of my poems, and they could just send me an email saying, add me to your list.
Yes, I was going to ask.
It took, in the beginning, I was nervous about sharing these poems. Now I'm beginning to think, oh, I guess they really do have value for people, so I want them to go out into the world.
I think you're right. And so every Wednesday they will
afternoon.
receive a new poem.
Yes.
And again, what was that email?
richorloff.com. It's my name, richorloff.com.
I enjoy your work so very much. I'm so glad we met and continue the friendship and the
I look forward to that.
We look forward to it. And so thank you again, Rich, so very, very much for being on The Radical Imagination.
My pleasure.
And thank you all so very, very much for being with us this week on The Radical Imagination. It's Jim Vredos. We'll see you again next week on The Radical Imagination.
Thank you.